Daniel had not planned to be home that morning. His work schedule was usually predictable. Leave at 8, return after 5, but today was different. A client meeting had been canceled last minute, and instead of heading back to the office, he decided to stop by home for a late breakfast. It was a cool, bright morning, the kind that usually made him feel relaxed. As he drove through the quiet streets of his neighborhood, he thought about surprising his wife Claire, maybe even having a cup of tea with his mother Margaret, who had been staying with them for the last few weeks. He parked the car in the driveway and noticed how still the house looked. Usually by mid-morning, he would hear the faint sound of the TV in the living room or the clinking of dishes from the kitchen. But today, there was nothing, no noise, no movement. Daniel unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air inside felt slightly different, heavier somehow. The scent of lavender from his mother's favorite air freshener lingered, but beneath it was something else, something tense he couldn't quite name. He closed the door quietly, almost instinctively, as if he didn't want to disturb whatever was going on. He set his keys down on the console table by the door and glanced around the living room. Everything seemed in place. His mother's knitting basket was on the armchair, her half-finished scarf neatly folded inside. A teacup sat on the coffee table, half full and slightly cooled. Daniel smiled faintly. His mother never left her tea unfinished unless something interrupted her. Then, he heard faint voices from upstairs. At first he couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. One voice was sharp, fast, and full of tension, Claire's. The other was slower but firm, his mother's. Daniel paused at the bottom of the staircase, straining to hear. "I've told you to stop interfering," Claire's voice came. Sharper now, each word clipped. "I am only telling you the truth," Margaret replied, her voice calm, but with a hint of steel. Daniel frowned. His mother and Claire got along on most days, though he had noticed small disagreements here and there. But this sounded different. It wasn't just a disagreement. It was heated. He climbed the first few steps quietly, not wanting to announce his presence until he understood what was happening. The voices grew clearer. "You think you can come into my home and control everything?" Claire's voice rose. "This is my son's home as much as yours," Margaret replied evenly, "and I will speak when I see something wrong." Daniel's heart began to pound. What could they possibly be talking about? He reached the landing halfway up the stairs and could now see the hallway above. His mother stood near the top of the staircase, facing Claire, who was blocking the entrance to their bedroom. Claire's arms were folded tightly across her chest, her face tense. Margaret's posture was upright, but Daniel could see her hand gripping the banister. The next moment caught Daniel completely off guard. Claire stepped forward quickly, closing the space between them. Her hand shot out and landed firmly on Margaret's shoulders. Daniel froze, not believing what he was seeing. It happened so fast, a sudden, forceful push. Shifted backward, her body tilting toward the staircase. Her eyes widened in surprise, and her hand slid off the banister. "Mom?" Daniel shouted, his voice breaking through the tense air like a chirk. Clap. He sprinted up the remaining steps 2 at a time, his heart in his throat. Just as Margaret's heel slipped off the top step, Daniel reached her, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward him. The force nearly pulled them both off balance, but he steadied himself against the wall. Margaret clung to him, her breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. She didn't speak, only looked at him with eyes full of shock and fear. Claire had stepped back, her face pale, lips pressed tightly together. But there was something else in her eyes. Not just surprise, but a flash of something Daniel couldn't quite read. Guilt? Anger? Panic? What on earth just happened? Daniel demanded, still holding his mother close. His voice was low but trembling with emotion. Claire shook her head quickly. "It's not what it looked like." Daniel's voice cracked. "I just saw you shove her." "I didn't shove her," Claire insisted, though her tone wavered. "We were arguing, and she stumbled." "I didn't stumble," Margaret said, her voice regaining strength. She gently pulled herself upright, leaning on Daniel's arm. "She pushed me." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Daniel looked from his mother to his wife, searching for some explanation that made sense. but all he felt was confusion and an icy knot forming in his chest. He led his mother carefully to the small armchair by the upstairs window and helped her sit. She was still trembling, and he could feel her pulse racing under his fingers. Claire stood by the bedroom door. Arms crossed again, though now her eyes darted between them nervously. Daniel's mind was spinning. He had walked into what should have been an ordinary morning, expecting warmth and calm. But instead, he had found a scene that didn't feel real, his wife and his mother on the verge of something dangerous. And the worst part was, he didn't yet know why. The sound of his mother's unsteady breathing filled the silence. Outside, a bird chirped faintly, oblivious to the storm brewing inside the house. Daniel swallowed hard, his thoughts racing. Whatever had just happened wasn't small, and he knew deep down that it was only the surface of something much bigger. Daniel's hands were still resting on his mother's shoulders. He could feel how cold her skin was and how lightly she was breathing, almost as if the shock had stolen her air. He crouched down so he could look directly into her eyes. "You hurt?" he asked softly. Margaret shook her head, though the movement was small. "Just frightened," she whispered. Daniel exhaled slowly, relief mixing with an undercurrent of anger. Was still standing toward Claire, who was still standing at the bedroom doorway. She had not moved from the spot where he had first seen her after the push. Her arms were no longer crossed, but her hands were pressed tightly together, almost as if she was holding herself still. "I need to understand what just happened," Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. Claire looked at him, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out right away. Finally, she said, "You came in at the wrong moment. It wasn't like that." "Then tell me," Daniel replied, his tone sharper now, "'cause from where I stood, it looked exactly like you tried to push my mother down the stairs." Eyes widened at his words, and she quickly shook her head. "No, Daniel! We were arguing, yes, but I didn't mean for her to—" She stopped herself. Biting her lip, Margaret leaned forward slightly in the chair. "You didn't mean for me?" "To what? Lose my balance? Fall? Break my bones?" Her voice was steady now, but there was a quiver beneath it that only Daniel could hear. Daniel's eyes flicked between them, his mind working hard to piece things together. Arguing about what? Claire looked away, her gaze fixed on the floor. "It's personal," she murmured. "It's my home," Daniel said quietly. But there was a firmness in his tone that left no space for argument. "Nothing that happens between you two is too personal for me to know." Margaret's hand moved to Daniel's arm. "I'll tell you," she said. Her eyes, warm but tired, met his. "I was asking her about the bank withdrawals." Daniel blinked, confused. "What withdrawals?" "From our joint family account," Margaret explained. "Large amounts over the past few months. I noticed them when I went to check my savings transfer last week. Thought it might be a mistake, but then I saw the pattern." Claire's head shot up. "You had no right to go through that," she said sharply, stepping forward. Margaret's voice remained calm. "I had every right to be concerned when money kept disappearing without explanation." Daniel felt a slow, sinking heaviness in his chest. "Claire," he said, turning toward her, "is this true? Have you been taking money out of the account without telling me?" Claire's eyes darted between them, and for a moment she looked like she might deny it outright. But then she crossed her arms again and said, "I borrowed some. I was going to put it back." "How much?" Daniel asked. She hesitated. "Not a lot." Margaret gave a small, humorless laugh. It was more than enough to notice. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Why?" Claire shifted uncomfortably. "I had expenses. Things you wouldn't understand." "Try me," Daniel said, his voice controlled but icy. Claire's cheeks flushed, and she looked down again. "I was paying off a personal loan. It's nothing illegal, just something I needed to take care of." Daniel let the silence sit for a moment. The only sound was the faint ticking of the wall clock down the hall. He was trying to process not just the withdrawals, but the fact that his mother had confronted Claire about them, and that confrontation had nearly ended in something far worse. "So you argued," Daniel said slowly, "and that argument ended with you pushing my mother Claire's voice rose. I didn't push her to hurt her. She wouldn't stop accusing me. She stood there acting like I was some kind of thief. I lost my temper for a second. Margaret's gaze sharpened. A second is all it takes to cause damage you can't undo. Daniel felt a strange mix of emotions, disbelief, anger, disappointment. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. Claire, whether you meant it or not, I saw you put your hands on her. That is not okay. Ever. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but her expression stayed defensive. I'm under so much pressure, Daniel. You don't understand what I've been dealing with. Then help me understand, he said, his voice softening just slightly. She shook her head, wiping her eyes quickly. Not now. Daniel turned to his mother. Do you want to go downstairs? Get some fresh air? Margaret nodded. He helped her stand, keeping a steady hand on her arm. As they moved toward the stairs, Claire stepped aside, her face tight and unreadable. When they reached the bottom, Daniel guided Margaret into the living room and settled her back into her armchair. She pulled the half-finished scarf from her knitting basket, holding it loosely in her lap. Though she didn't start working on it, Daniel stood for a moment, looking at her, then turned toward the staircase again. Claire was still at the top, watching them. He could feel the distance between them, not just the physical space of the stairs, but something deeper, something that would not be easy to close. He knew the rest of the day would not be peaceful. The truth was out in pieces, but there was more underneath, and whatever came next was going to be harder than anything they had faced before. If you want, I can now expand part 3, where Daniel begins searching for the truth, and the tension between his wife and mother sharpens even more. That's where the story really deepens into emotional conflict. Daniel sat in the living room, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. His mother sat across from him in her armchair, the scarf still untouched in her lap. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The tension from upstairs had followed them down like a shadow. Margaret was the first to break the silence. I didn't want you to find out like this, she said quietly, but I couldn't keep it from you any longer. Daniel looked up, his brows furrowed. How long have you known? A week, she admitted. When I first saw the withdrawals, I thought it might be some bank error, even called them. But when they confirmed the transactions, I realized someone was taking the money. I checked the details, and they were all linked to the account Claire has access to. Daniel leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow breath. You tell me right away? I wanted to be sure, Margaret said gently. I thought maybe. If I talked to her directly, we could sort it out quietly. Didn't want to bring trouble into your marriage unless I had to. Daniel nodded slowly, appreciating her intentions but also feeling frustrated. And when you confronted her this morning, Margaret's eyes darkened slightly. She denied it at first. Then she got angry. She said I was interfering, that I had no right to question her. I told her this wasn't about me controlling her, it was about honesty. Gus. When Margaret hesitated, her voice catching slightly, put her hands on me. Daniel's stomach tightened. He had seen enough upstairs to know that his mother wasn't exaggerating. He stood up and began pacing slowly across the room. I need to see for myself. I can't just take anyone's word, not yours, not hers, without knowing the full truth. This is too serious. Margaret gave him a small nod. I understand. Daniel walked to the study and opened the small cabinet where he kept important papers, pulled out his laptop and sat at the desk, his fingers moving quickly as he logged into their joint account. The numbers appeared on the screen, and within seconds, he could see the transactions his mother had mentioned. Large withdrawals. Always in even amounts, and always spaced about 2 weeks apart. They had started 4 months ago. The money was transferred into another account, one Daniel didn't recognize. He copied down the account number and sat back in his chair. It was undeniable now. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Claire had been taking the money. He closed the laptop and walked back into the living room. His mother watched him closely. You saw it? She asked. Yes, he said, his voice low. You were right, Margaret. Gave a small sigh, as though she had been holding her breath all along. Daniel, I'm sorry. I know this is hard to hear. It's not just hard, he replied. It's disappointing. I thought Claire and I told each other everything. I don't understand why she wouldn't just talk to me. At that moment, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Claire appeared in the doorway, her face calm, but her eyes still uneasy. We need to talk, she said. Daniel glanced at his mother, then back at Claire. Yes, we do. Claire stepped into the room but stayed standing near the doorway. Know what you're thinking? She began. But you don't know the whole story. Then tell me, Daniel said evenly. Because right now, all I see are bank records showing money leaving our account without my knowledge. And I see my wife arguing with my mother to the point where she almost fell down the stairs. Claire's lips tightened. I didn't mean for that to happen. I lost my temper and I regret it. But as for the money, I wasn't stealing it. I was paying off a debt that I've been carrying for years. What kind of debt? Daniel asked. A personal loan, she said quickly. From before we were married, I didn't tell you about it because, well, I didn't want you to think less of me. I thought I could handle it on my own. Daniel's brow furrowed. So instead of telling me you decided to take money without asking I was going to put it back, she insisted. I just needed to clear the debt first, so it wouldn't grow with interest. I didn't think you'd even notice it was gone for a short while. Margaret shifted in her chair. You didn't think about what would happen if he did notice? Or if I did? Claire's gaze flicked toward her, then back to Daniel. I didn't want this to turn into a fight. I thought I could fix it before. Anyone got hurt? Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. Someone almost did get hurt. The words hung in the air. Claire looked away, clearly struggling to find the right thing to say. I know I've made mistakes, she admitted finally. But I'm asking you to believe me when I say I didn't mean to harm your mother. Daniel crossed his arms, studying her face. Intent doesn't erase actions. I'm trying to understand, but you've put us in a position where trust is broken. That's not something you can just patch up overnight. Claire's shoulders slumped slightly. I know, she whispered. Daniel glanced at his mother, who was watching quietly, her hands folded neatly in her lap. For now, he said slowly, I think it's best if we all take some space. Mom, I'll arrange for you to stay with Sarah for a few days. Margaret nodded without protest. Claire's eyes widened. You're sending her away? I'm making sure everyone has time to cool down, Daniel replied firmly, and I need time to think. This isn't just about the money. It's about how quickly things escalated today. Claire opened her mouth to speak, but then closed it again. Perhaps realizing that arguing further would only make things worse, Daniel knew this conversation wasn't over. In fact, it was only the beginning of a much harder discussion about trust, honesty, and the future of their marriage. But for now, he needed to take one step at a time. The first step was making sure his mother was safe. The afternoon light had started to fade by the time Daniel sat alone in his study. The house was quiet now. His mother had gone upstairs to pack a small bag for her stay at his sister Sarah's place. Claire was in the kitchen, moving around softly, avoiding any direct interaction since their earlier conversation. Daniel opened his laptop again and stared at the banking records on the screen. He clicked through each transaction, studying the dates and amounts. Every withdrawal was consistent, $2,000 here, $3,000 there, and always moved to the same unknown account. He copied the account number into a search tool provided by his bank. The name that came up wasn't one he recognized, Michael Trent. He leaned back in his chair, frowning. If Claire said this was for a personal loan, why wasn't the account in her name or in the name of a loan company? A quiet knock came at the study door. It was his mother, holding a small overnight bag. Sarah's on her way, she said softly. Thanks, Mom, Daniel replied. Do you feel all right? Margaret nodded, though her eyes still showed traces of the mornings. Shock. Physically, yes. Emotionally. I suppose that will take time. Daniel hesitated, then asked, Do you know the name Michael Trent? His mother's expression tightened. No. Who is that? That's the name on the account where the money went. Margaret's brows drew together. Not a loan company, then? This doesn't seem like it, Daniel said. And that worries me more? They shared a brief silence before Margaret spoke again. Daniel, I know you love Claire. But love doesn't mean ignoring the truth. Whatever this is, you need the full picture before you can move forward. Daniel nodded slowly. I'm going to find out. When Sarah arrived to take Margaret, the atmosphere was careful and polite. Claire helped carry the bag to the door, offering a small, awkward goodbye to her mother-in-law. Margaret returned it with a nod, but her eyes didn't linger. Once the car pulled away, the house felt even more still. Daniel didn't waste any time. He returned to the study and called the bank's fraud investigation line, explained that he had seen suspicious withdrawals and needed more information about the receiving account. The representative confirmed the transfers but explained that privacy laws limited what could be shared without a legal request, however. The representative did let one detail slip. The account had been opened less than a year ago, and the address on file was in a neighboring city. Daniel thanked. The men ended the call. The detail only deepened his questions. Why was Claire sending money to a man in another city? That evening, after hours of turning the situation over in his mind, Daniel decided to confront her again. He found her in the living room, curled up, on the couch with a book she clearly wasn't reading. We need to talk, he said simply. Claire set the book down, her fingers tightening on the cover for a second before letting it go. I know. Daniel sat across from her. I checked the account the money went to. It's not a loan company. It's a person, Michael Trent. Who is he? Claire's eyes flickered with surprise, then worry. Daniel, who is he? His voice was calm but unyielding. She took a breath. He's someone I knew before we got married. A friend who helped me out financially a long time ago. I owed him money, and I promised I'd pay him back. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Why didn't you just tell me? 'Cause I knew you'd have questions, she said quietly. Questions I didn't want to answer. I thought it would be simpler to handle it on my own. Claire, do you understand what this looks like? He asked. You were sending thousands of dollars to a man I've never met. Without telling me, and when my mother confronted you about it, things escalated so badly she almost fell down the stairs. Her eyes filled with tears.
I know how it looks.
But it wasn't anything inappropriate. I just didn't want you to think I was irresponsible or hiding things. Daniel sighed. But you were hiding things. And now, because of how this happened, trust has been damaged not just between you and me, but between you and my mother. Claire looked down at her hands. I don't know how to fix it. You start by being completely honest. He said, no more half-truths. No more waiting until you're caught to explain. If there's anything else I don't know, you need to tell me now. She shook her head. There's nothing else. Daniel studied her face, trying to decide if he believed her. He wanted to. Part of him still clung to the hope that this was all a misunderstanding that could be untangled. But another part of him, the part that had been shaken by the sight of his mother on the edge of a fall, knew that trust would have to be earned back slowly. I'll help you resolve whatever's left of this debt, he said finally. From now on, there are no secret withdrawals. Everything goes through both of us. Claire nodded, a mix of relief and uncertainty on her face. All right. Daniel stood. And until things settle, my mother stays at Sarah's. I want her to feel safe. Claire didn't argue. She only nodded again, though her eyes showed a hint of sadness. That night, Daniel lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. The truth about the money had come out, but the bigger truth about trust, about how quickly emotions could turn into dangerous actions, was still something they would have to face. And he wasn't sure what the final outcome would be. Daniel woke before dawn, the house still and gray. He lay on his back and listened to the quiet. The events of the last day replayed in his mind like a slow reel. He pictured the staircase, pictured his mother's startled face. He pictured Claire standing rigid in the doorway. He felt the same blend of worry and sadness wash over him. He wanted peace. He also wanted truth. He knew those two wishes would meet only if everyone in the home chose honesty and care. When the first light touched the curtains, he got up, made tea, and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. He wrote 2 words at the top of a clean page. Next steps. The page stayed blank for a minute while he gathered his thoughts. Then he started listing practical things. Speak to Michael Trent. Confirm the debt. Create a repayment plan that both partners can see. Ask Claire to attend counseling with him. Set clear rules for money. Invite his mother home only when she felt safe. And before any of that, ask for real apologies, spoken and lived. Claire came into the kitchen quietly, hair gathered back, face thoughtful. She opened the refrigerator and then closed it again, as if she had forgotten what she was. Looking for... I couldn't sleep, she said. Me neither, Daniel replied. He gestured to the chair across from him. I wrote some steps. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm trying to build something we can stand on. She sat down and folded her hands. I want that too, she said. I know I broke your trust. I want to make it right. Daniel nodded. First, I need to speak to Michael. Not to start a problem. I just need to hear the truth from him, and I need to close this loop. Then, we make a plan together. No more secret payments. Everything is open. Claire swallowed. I understand. She looked down for a moment and then raised her eyes again. I'll call him now and ask him to speak with you. She stepped into the living room to make the call. Daniel heard a low voice through the wall. Short sentences, long pauses. When she returned, she looked relieved and nervous. He can talk in an hour, she said. I'll be here with you when you call. It's an hour later. Daniel sat at the study desk with his phone on speaker. Claire sat beside him, hands clasped tightly. Hello, Michael, Daniel said when the call connected. This is Daniel. Thank you for speaking with me. The man's voice was calm. He explained that years ago, before Claire married Daniel, he had helped her during a difficult time. The money was not a bank loan. It was a personal help that later became a private debt between the two of them. He confirmed the total amount, confirmed the schedule of repayments. He confirmed there was no ongoing pressure from him. Only a repeated promise from Claire that she would repay him when she could. Daniel listened carefully. He asked direct, respectful questions. He wrote down the amounts and dates. Then he took a steady breath. Thank you, he said. I appreciate your honesty. I'll arrange the final repayment in a way I can verify. After that, no more transfers will leave our home in secret. When the call ended, the study fell quiet. Claire sat very still. I should have told you everything from the start, she said at last, her voice soft. I was afraid. I didn't want you to see me as someone who couldn't manage her past. I tried to fix it on my own, and I made it worse. Daniel placed the notebook between them. Cannot go back, he said. But we can go forward in a different way. Will you come with me to counseling? I want help learning how to handle conflict before it explodes. I want help rebuilding trust. I will, she said. I'll show up every time, they said. An appointment for the following week with a family counselor who specialized in communication and trust. Daniel then called his sister to check on his mother. Sarah said Margaret was comfortable, but quiet. She's resting, Sarah said, and she's thinking. She loves you. She's just shaken. Tell her I'll visit today, Daniel said. I won't push her to come home. I'll just listen. Before he left, he and Claire opened their online banking and created new rules. Every transfer needed two approvals. Every large expense needed a written note in their shared budget. File. They set weekly check-ins on Sunday evenings to talk about money and plans. The changes were simple on paper, but Daniel could feel how strong they would be in practice at Sarah's house. Margaret sat by the window with a light blanket around her shoulders. When Daniel arrived, she smiled gently and patted the seat. Beside her, he sat and took her hand. How are you feeling? He asked. Better, she said. A little tired, but better. He told her about the call with Michael, explained the new rules. He shared the counseling plan. He did not try to defend Claire's actions. He also did not add extra blame. Kept two facts, and he kept to the future. Margaret listened without interrupting. When he finished, she nodded. Those are wise steps, she said. Thank you for telling me everything. Daniel hesitated. I would like to invite you home when you feel ready, he said. Not today. Not until you say so. Claire is going to apologize to you in person, and not only with words, she will show it with her behavior. Margaret looked out the window for a long moment. I will visit for tea in a few days, she said. We will sit at the table. The house feels calm. I will know I can come back for longer visits. I want peace for all of us." They sat together in the soft afternoon light. Daniel felt something inside him settle. Not a perfect peace, but the beginning of one, the kind that grows when people act with care. Back home, Claire had prepared a simple dinner. She had also written a letter. She handed it to Daniel without asking him to read it right away. "It's for your mother," she said. "I will speak to her in person. But I also wanted to give her something thoughtful that she can read when she's ready." Daniel put the letter on the console table by the door. "We will give it to her on the day she visits," he said. The next morning, Daniel and Claire attended their first counseling session. The counselor, a calm woman with kind eyes, set simple rules for speaking and listening. "Slow down," she said. "Name the feeling before you name the fault. Ask for what you need before you point to what the other did wrong." Daniel learned how fast his voice rose when he felt worried. Claire learned how quickly she shut down when she felt judged. They both learned new ways to pause, reflect, and try again. At the end of the session, the counselor gave them small homework, 10 minutes each night to share one truth from the day, one gratitude, and one small request. Later that week, Margaret came for tea. She arrived with a calm face and careful steps. Claire met her at the door, hands open, body still. "Thank you for coming," Claire said. Her voice was clear and honest. "I am truly sorry for what I did and for the fear I caused. I will spend the time it takes to earn back your trust. I hope one day you will feel fully at ease with me again." Margaret listened and did not rush her reply. "Thank you for your words," she said. "I will watch your actions. We will move at the pace of safety and respect." Then she smiled gently, and the three of them went to the kitchen table. The tea was warm. The room was quiet. They spoke about simple things. First, the garden, the weather, a recipe Margaret wanted to try. No one forced a deep talk. Some bridges form better when they are not shaken too hard. Over the next month, Daniel sent the final repayment to close the account with Michael, using a method that produced a clear receipt for both partners. He saved the confirmation in their shared budget file. He and Claire kept their Sunday check-ins and their nightly 10 minutes. They missed a few nights, then caught up the next day. Progress looked like steady, small steps, not sudden victories. Claire began a new habit. When she felt pressure or shame rising inside her, she named it out loud. "I feel scared you'll think less of me," she would say. Or, "I feel rushed and I want to pause before we continue." Each time, Daniel tried to slow down and make room. He learned to ask questions with kindness. He learned to say, "I need honesty more than perfection." Margaret returned for longer visits. She and Claire gardened together one morning, side by side, talking about herbs and soil. Later, Claire brought out the letter and asked if Margaret would like to keep it or read it together. Margaret took it home and wrote a short note back the next week. The note said, "Thank you for the letter. I see your effort. Keep going." One evening, Daniel stood at the bottom of the staircase and looked up. The memory was still there, but it was softer now, like a shadow at sunset. He did not pretend the past had not happened. He also did not let it own the future. He called up to Claire, who was putting fresh sheets on the guest room bed for his mother's next visit. "Do you need help?" he asked. She smiled down at him. "Yes," she said, "always." He climbed the stairs slowly, not to rush, but to stay present. He tucked in one corner of the sheet while she tucked in the other. Simple task. Done. Together, when they finished, they stood back and looked at the smooth bed. It was such a small thing. It also felt like a true thing. Later that night, Daniel opened his notebook to the page labeled Next Steps. He drew a small check mark beside each line. Confirmed the debt done. Clear repayment done. New money rules kept. Apologies spoken and shown. Welcome his mother at her pace. Build trust daily. He closed the notebook and felt a quiet gratitude. Life at home was not perfect, and it might never be. But it was honest, and it was kind more often than not. That was enough for now. He turned off the light and the house settled. In the gentle dark, three people breathed the same S.